important discussion that came from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission centers around museums and how to begin the vital task of giving back historic Indigenous artifacts. Now, the Royal BC Museum has published an in-depth handbook to help guide the way.
It took us till early spring, and then we set up the online version.
Neel is one of the authors of a newly published in-depth guideline for communities and museums, the Indigenous Repatriation Handbook.
It was actually a recommendation that came out of a repatriation symposium we held in 2017, and we had over 200 members of community from around the province as well as museum professionals, and asked them what should we do first about repatriation. And one of the biggest recommendations was we need some kind of a guidebook to walk us all through the steps, because it's such a new process for communities. It's also a very new process for a lot of museums. We wanted to make it online so that we could do any updates as we go, because it is a new process, so we're learning things pretty well every day. But we wanted to also provide a copy to the first group of communities that approached us about repatriation, so that they could test it and let us know if this was a format that they liked. And the feedback we received was, yes, we do like the book format. Not all communities have access to reliable internet, so the book format became really popular, especially in remote communities.
The museum has its own publishing department. The first edition of the handbook was released in the spring.
What we have, a little bit of history about why and how pieces landed in museums over the last 100 or so years. So we provide that little bit of a background so people understand what's in museums in the first place. We drew on the experiences of the Haida Gwaii Museum that has had a lot of experience in repatriation and who authored this book along with the museum, and put together some templates that we thought were useful, found some terminologies that people could become more familiar with, and then we also took a look around the world to see the museums that actually have collections that come from BC, and provided a list of those museums with their permission. What I'm excited about is it really enhances the relationships that have been there for a long time, and I think brings us into a new dialogue around how communities and their treasures from their past and their present treasures are presented in museum settings, and brings a voice, the Indigenous voice, into the museum, and I think tells a better story about all of those wonderful things that we see but don't always understand.
This Week in History, brought to you by the Royal BC Museum, bringing British Columbia's stories together.